I'm going to make a very brief statement, a brief few words on the particular situation in relation to credit unions, because in my part of the country, mainly in rural areas, the credit unions have been so important in terms of supporting families, supporting farms, supporting small business, supporting communities. And at a time in many of the towns in my region, when the banks are closing, shutting up shop, leaving town, moving away from the people who put their 10 shillings, £1, fivers into those banks many years ago, people who had a lot of poverty, but they invested in our banks and built up a lot of their profits. And now, when the bad times come, the banks close up shop and move out. And quite frankly, in many respects, our banks don't care. But our credit unions do. A voluntary, visionary movement with over 10 billion in savings, 12 billion in assets, 360 credit union branches throughout the country. What a phenomenal story. What a successful story. And even throughout the recession, when many banks closed their doors on people in very difficult situations, when they may only have wanted a few euro here, small loan, as somebody said earlier, to get them over a situation, a family situation, a family celebration where the money was short, the credit union's door was always opened. And despite all these major financial institutions who had all the backup and all the money and acting recklessly in this country and bringing grief down on so many families, the credit union survived. And yes, there may have been one or two bad stories, but through all of that, the credit union survived. But remember, in the middle of that crisis, there was a lot of talk, a lot of conch about how the credit union is destroyed. They have overstretched themselves. And there was a lot of negative talk, and I think some of that was deliberately against the credit union movement. And there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it in this country. There are people in high positions who would far prefer not to have the credit union. I want to very much welcome the committee's report under the chairmanship of Deputy McGuinness, an all-party committee, who clearly state in their report how important and how crucial and how critical the credit union movement will be for this country moving forward. I have no doubt, if they were allowed to enter into the housing crisis, where they were prepared to invest billions, we certainly would not have the crisis today. We would not have children without a home. We would not have young parents without a home, because I believe that the credit union would again show exemplary leadership if they were allowed to do that. They have time and time again been the only avenue financially open to people to keep them going. So in relation to what they want to do for small business, again, what do we see? We see a group of people, many of them volunteers, who want to literally roll up their sleeves to be able to support and promote small businesses up and down this country. And there are many, many small businesses, despite all the new initiatives and all the help that's out there, there are many of them who still get it extremely difficult to get sufficient finance to keep their business going. We all accept that, Lyndon, it has to be done prudently to be sustainable. We all accept that. But I think in relation to what's going on with the regulator, and to some extent, in my view, the suffocation of a movement that has done so much, I think we really need to ensure that the regulator does not get away with this. Because if we do, we will have buried one of the greatest voluntary organisations that ever existed in this country. So in conclusion, Cancora, I would say I give my full support to the credit union movement. I haven't much prepared on this evening, but I have a lot of documentation on it. And since I became a member of this Dáil, I have been very supportive of what Deputy McGuinness and the committees have been doing. And I've always had an association myself with the local credit unions. So I'm proud to stand here this evening and give my support to the credit union, and give my support to Deputy McGuinness, the chairman of the committee, and others who really want to allow the credit union more involve themselves in making this country a better place. And again, I will go back on the final point, where the banks are walking out and closing up shop. The credit unions are standing there with their communities, and I think they should be allowed to expand and not allow a regulator, or maybe a government, and I know Mr Darcy is very sincere about the message he is giving,
but a government should not be allowed to squeeze them out. And if we do, we will live to regret it.
Very much, Deputy